Afternoon, citizens. I trust you all had a good Christmas. I just wanted to do a final video for 2022, it being New Year's Eve today, and I've got a particular script worked out, but I did want to talk about these. I wanted to talk about the FBI specifically. Now, I mean, I only know what everybody else knows about the FBI is that they're an American, I suppose you would call them, a law enforcement agency. Dealing with, supposedly dealing with serious crime, organised crime, and I guess anti-terrorism to a certain degree. And I wanted to talk about them because it, and also the CIA, which is, as we all know, is the United States Foreign Intelligence Service, and the FBI in relation to the Twitter files, which have been released over the past month, and also the continuing revelations about the CIA, particularly pertaining to the assassination of President Kennedy. And I don't have any great insight on this, not even being an American, but these kind of things do matter. And I was thinking at the opposite end of the scale about my friend Rob, who's a teacher, who I mentioned in my last video. And it seems as if the education system, in Britain, and I imagine elsewhere in the West, was probably the first of the institutions to fall to, I don't know what you call it. You can call it the woke agenda, or you can call it, the communists, or whatever it is. But it was the first institution that was, it seems as if it was targeted by those who wish to undermine the entire rationale of the West. Now that makes sense, because you're targeting the children, and then you're targeting older children, and you're targeting university students, and this has been going on for a very long time, since the 60s at least. And so it started with education, and it appears to have finished. If it is finished, I mean, if there's more to come, it doesn't seem like there's much more that can come, but it does seem as if the last of the institutions to be captured are the law enforcement agencies and the secret services, not just of the United States, but everywhere. But I'm assuming it's everywhere. And I think that does illustrate how bad this has got. As in, the long march through the institution started with education and ended with the security services. So you start with the children, you start indoctrinating the children to get them to think a certain way. And you end with the security services basically saying for all of those people who haven't been successfully indoctrinated as children and as teenagers and growing up, and if you haven't been indoctrinated now, you now have to face the security services who will jail you if you don't think the correct way. You know, one of the intermediate institutions that has been captured, of course, in between these two things, is the media, obviously. And one of the ways that we know that the media has been captured, as if we didn't know already, but you know, if you were still one of those people who were sceptical of the claims that that all of the institutions have been captured, you only have to look now at the revelations that are coming out about the FBI's collusion with Twitter and probably all the other platforms. And how these things come out and yet they're not reported on. So you start with the children, indoctrinate the children, tell the children what to think. And then all the other institutions, including the media, so the media decides what to report and what not to report. So further indoctrinating the adult population, the mature population. And then for anybody who hasn't actually been successfully indoctrinated by that time, who hasn't been persuaded, cajoled, shamed into thinking a certain way, you get to the stage where the final encouragement, or the stick, if you like, is if you haven't started thinking correctly by now, we're just going to turn you into a terrorist. We're going to rebrand you as a terrorist. Now, of course, this has happened at the other end of the scale, as I understand, in America, with parents who are resisting the actions of the school boards, and even in some cases getting the school boards voted out because they don't like what their children are being taught. And of course these people are being rebranded as terrorists, domestic terrorists. So this walk through this march through the institutions is now complete. There isn't anything else to go. You know, so you have the sort of thing like the Twitter files coming out, which in previous times would have had the media all over it. You know, you'd have had lots of ambitious investigative journalists going all over this, being the first one, wanting to be the first one to break the story. And now that doesn't happen. It's I wouldn't say it's proved, because it's not actually gone through a court of law, but it seems to be fairly obvious to anybody who cares to look that the FBI directed Twitter to silence opposition forces, opposition opinions on the COVID narrative. And this is now almost a given. You know, we pretty much know that it's happened. I mean, of course, it hasn't been through the rigmarole of a trial, yes, but the evidence is pretty damning. And yet the media won't report on it. So that got me thinking about what is what approach do we have now? Because we know that we can't rely on the education system to neutrally teach our children the things that are useful in their lives. We only know that they will indoctrinate them. And we can't rely on the security services to secure the safety and the prosperity of the United States and other Western countries. And of course, in the middle of that, we can't rely on the media to report it when it has been established that, for instance, in the case of America, that the US Constitution has been violated by its own security services. Now, this is not a new thing necessarily, but because the Snowden revelations were a massive story. But even then, nobody carried the can for it. Nobody was fired. In fact, quite a lot of people who were doing it actually got promoted. And the people at the very top of the tree. So this isn't new. And you might even be tempted to think that if one were of a conspiratorial mindset, one might think that they knew the Snowden revelations were going to come out. They knew they were going to come out, and they knew that nobody was going to do anything about it. I mean, it's pretty cynical, but you know, one of the beefs I have with American Second Amendment advocates is that they were forever saying that the Second Amendment protects all the other amendments. Now, like the Fourth Amendment, which is pertaining to the Snowden revelations, and it became evident that the CIA and the NSA were violating the US Constitution hundreds of millions of times every single day. And the Second Amendment types never did a damn thing about it. They never did a sodding thing about it. Now, I agree with the Second Amendment, and I wish we had it here. But I do think that the advocates of it, you know, the argument rings rather hollow when they say, well, it protects all the other amendments, and yet not a single shot was fired in defence of the Fourth Amendment. So it gives you the suspicion that those defenders of the Second Amendment aren't actually interested in defending the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. All they're interested in defending is the Second Amendment, which is worth defending on its own, but it's also worth defending all the others. But I'm wondering, you know, it makes me wonder where we go from here. Now that we know, almost beyond a shadow of doubt, and certainly beyond reasonable doubt, that all of the institutions, all the way up to the security services, and also, you know, the houses, you know, the Houses of Parliament and the UN Senate and Congress and all the rest of it. We know that all of them have been captured as well. So, and even though we know that, and even though there's overwhelming proof of this, the media, which has been so completely captured that they will not even touch it if it criticises their own side. They're still banging on about January the 6th being, you know, the worst thing that's ever happened. But they won't touch anything that, you know, the Hunter Biden laptop, they won't touch that at all. Yeah. And so it makes me think that it doesn't really matter what the facts are. It doesn't matter what the revelations are. The people who are in charge of these institutions are so confident in their ability to just brazen it out that it doesn't matter. It doesn't actually matter what happens. Just, you know, to the extent they're not even trying to hide it anymore, because they know that nothing will happen. And if they've got if they've got education, they've got the media, and they've got security services on their side, there's no logical reason why we can assume that they don't have the legal system and the justice system and the courts and everything else on their side. But the thing is, most people don't know this. Most people still watch the television. Most people still listen to what's written in the newspapers. Not as many as there used to be, but they are still in the majority, and that's why the revelations make no difference. So I've said before, it's not a matter of truth versus lies, it's just a matter of reach. Who can we reach to tell people about this? How can we reveal these things to them in a way that makes them surprised, makes them concerned, and most of all makes them angry? And even though Twitter is now in the hands of Elon Musk and a lot of stuff's coming out, you know, most of the normies don't look at Twitter, so they don't know. So they still think the pandemic was a real pandemic. They still think that the institutions basically do a good job of basically looking out for us and are basically doing their duty. That's what they still think. So we have to come up with ways of highlighting these certain facts which will elicit the proper reaction from people. Now, this isn't going to be easy. It's not going to be easy because we're always going to be fighting against the accusation of being a conspiracy theorist. You know, which is it's an astonishingly successful term. That it's a way of delegitimising anything anybody says, and You know, it really doesn't make any difference whatsoever what your general tone is. You know, I mean, everybody knows that the system is corrupt to a certain degree. You know, and they know that people skim off the top, and they know that the rich always look after themselves, and the people at the top of the tree, you know, just hand out government contracts to all their mates and everything. Everybody knows this. They know it, and to a certain degree they accept it. And one of the reasons that they accept it is because they know that even though the system is corrupt, the system has basically left me alone. You know, it's allowed me to live my life, it's allowed me to start a business, it's allowed me to make money. And now the difference is that they're now not leaving us alone anymore. You know, the Canadian truckers, the Dutch farmers, the 15-minute cities in Oxford and Canterbury and elsewhere. These are all examples of them not leaving us alone, even if we don't threaten them. And in order for them to continue to leave us alone, you know, some of us have to stick our heads above the parapet and challenge them. And of course, once you challenge them, then they go after you. So some genuine bravery is required here. But I think we all assume that once a certain revelation comes out, you know, we all imagine that that's just going to be that one revelation that comes out is going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back. Well, I don't think that's going to happen. You know, I don't think the dam will burst, but I think it'll crumble gradually over time. There'll be you know, we have to take this thing down by 1,000 cuts. I mean, there may be a point at which the entire edifice falls, but I think it's unlikely. I think what's more likely is that it will crumble gradually in a way that allows the people at the top to get away with it. So eventually everyone will realise how they've been had. But everybody responsible will be able to get away scot-free. Now, that's pretty depressing in a way. But I do think the key to this is to wake up as many people as possible. Now, and that is not, you're not going to do that online. You aren't going to do that online. The television is absolutely, definitely not going to do it. You know, neither the newspapers. I mean, I saw a Telegraph article the other day which basically confirmed what most of us knew, that the lockdowns were all a disaster. It's proved that they've all been a disaster. And for some strange reason, Downing Street and the Houses of Parliament are not on fire, and they should be. But I think our key is to, we're doing this stuff online is not going to be sufficient. We've got to get out there and speak to genuine everyday people who have thus far been too uninterested to look into what's been happening. So, as I say, I'm going to start my stall up again in the new year, and I'm going to start haranguing people to help me. I've been far too English about all this for too long, allowing people to come and help me if they wanted to. But I'm actually going to start asking people now, and I'm going to start being a bit more insistent, because I can't do this on my own. I can't do this all on my own. It doesn't work on your own. But as an example, I was quite involved in the anti-ID campaign in the early 2000s, and we did win the argument. We did win. You could argue, and with some justification, that the reason that we won was because they realised that they could keep us all under 24/7 surveillance by electronic means without resorting to ID cards. Now, that's probably true. That is probably true. But nevertheless, they did lose the argument. They did lose it. So it does show that it is possible to win the argument. And we were a very tiny ragtag bunch of people. We didn't have a lot of resources behind us, but we used to go out every other weekend, and we used to highlight the dangers of all this stuff, and we did win the argument. So the argument can be won. And you don't have to change everybody's mind. You really don't. You just have to change enough people's minds, and it's nowhere near the majority of people either. So, as I've said before, what I'm going to concentrate on is what I consider to be one of the clearest present dangers, is the cashless society, because that really will affect everybody, and it's quite easy to demonstrate how it will affect everybody. And it's quite easy to demonstrate that people can find themselves on the wrong side of that line quite easily. The majority of the people are just too bovinely stupid to ever believe that they'll ever be on the wrong side of the line. Most people won't ever be on the wrong side of the line, because most people are compliant idiots. But you'll never change those people's minds. You will never do that. We just have to change enough people's minds. Yeah, in America's case, I mean, you know, with regard particularly to the CIA, it does sound as if what many of us suspected all along, that it was the CIA that assassinated Kennedy, or at least engineered it so that he would be killed. I mean, a lot of people are talking about it now as if it's confirmation that they killed Kennedy. Well, you know, I haven't seen anything which is confirmation. I mean, there's an awful lot of circumstantial evidence, and there always was, but there's more coming out. There's more coming out in this last release of documents, but particularly pertaining to the CIA's dealings with Oswald. But what does it say about a country where it's, you know, if it is confirmed, what does it say about a country where the agency, the security agency that exists to keep America safe and to advance America's interests, has so twisted its own raison d'etre, its whole reason for existence, that they've twisted it to such an extent that they consider murdering their own president as fulfilling their, you know, their ideology, it's fulfilling their duty. I mean, what it obviously says is that, as if we needed persuading of this, but some people do need persuading of it, is that the CIA is not there to protect America. It's there to protect the establishment, which is not the same thing at all. You know, it's like it's complete corruption. It's absolute. It's almost like that it has been it has been corrupted to such an extent that it is only the words on their charter, you know, the sort of internal charter that they have, their mission statement, as if that is the only thing that survives from their original mission of protecting America. Everything else has been corrupted to an extent that everything else they do fulfills a different and opposite agenda. To protect not protect the people, but protect the powerful. And I'm wondering if, you know, I like a good spy film. You know, I like a good spy film, and, you know, at least since Watergate, the spy films have taken on a darker turn. you know, of these paranoid and fanatical cold warriors who sit in the shadows and they do terrible things. But the backdrop to behind all of that was that, well, they do terrible things on our behalf. You know, there's a great spy film, one of my favourites from about 1975, called 3 Days of the Condor, and Robert Redford plays this low-level guy who just reads books, and if he comes across any decent plots or something, he while reading all these spy books, he pushes them upstairs to the top brass, and he can't, you know, obviously comes across this book, you know, and his whole team gets wiped out, and he doesn't know what to do, so he's on his own. And when he has a talk with one of the senior CIA men, you know, towards the end of the film, and he says, you know, do you have plans to invade the Middle East? And the CIA man, senior guy, played by Cliff Robertson, says, you know, we play games, you know, how much would it take? How many men would it cost? How much money would it cost? What weapons would we need? And then he says, you know, when Americans start running out of fuel and food, you know, they'll want us to get it for them. And Robert Redford, in an idealistic way, says, well, you could ask them. And he says, they won't want us to ask them. They'll just want us to get it for them. And so there was this sort of thing that these were terrible people, but they had a noble cause. And now that's gone. Now that is gone. These are terrible people, and they have a completely ignoble cause. They have an anti-American cause, just like MI6 does in Britain and all the other security services all over the world. They are not fighting for their country. They're fighting for themselves and for the people who pay their wages. You know, which they think is the politicians. In fact, it's us who's paying for them. So I can't actually watch spy films anymore. You know, I just can't watch it because, you know, at base of these things is this idea that, well, these people are, you know, they're getting their hands dirty on our behalf. They're doing our dirty work, and, you know, it's a nasty business, but someone's got to do it, and, you know, all that kind of shit. You know, and I used to believe it, and that was, you know, that was kind of the premise of that film, the 3 Days of the Condor. They did bad things for us, but when you find out, as you know, it seems to be at least as likely as not that Kennedy was killed by the CIA. Where does that leave you? You know, and if that leaves you with as someone who just shrugs their shoulders and just carries on, well, you know, maybe America deserves to fall if that happens. We have some mountain to climb to fix this. You know, we won't do it online. You know, online's important, but it's not half the battle. You know, it's maybe a quarter of the battle. You know, we're going to have to try and fix things from the outside, because none of us who who believe this stuff, you know, almost by definition, are not the sort of people who are in institutions. I suppose we have to get people to, we have to get them to where we are, you know, and it's not impossible, because, you know, I was one of those people, and not very long ago either. I was one of those people who believed that, you know, the British state was, you know, essentially good, and that, you know, and it had made mistakes, and it had, you know, and it had broken some rules, and there was some shadowy people in the background who were doing things on my behalf, even if I didn't approve of them personally, and in a particular sense, you know. But that's all gone now. That's all gone now, and it's, you know, it is doable, but it does require effort on our part, and it requires some vigilance and some persistence, and it requires us to stand in the rain, you know, when you'd rather be doing something else. And it requires standing in the rain rather than doing something that you much want to do, much more want to do, and talking to people who are going to dismiss you and call you names and laugh at you. You know, that's the cost of it, you know. And if you put it like that, then it's not actually that terrible, you know. Much as I hate to quote fucking Piers Morgan, but when he was going bonkers over the lockdown, and he was saying, well, we're not asking you to face machine guns, all we're asking you to do is sit on your sofa. And of course, you know, if it really was a deadly pandemic, then it wouldn't have been too much to ask. But as we knew that it was no such thing. But if you think of it like that, if you think of it as, well, we don't actually, at least not yet, we don't actually have to face any machine guns. You know, we just have to face different conversations, and, you know, and perhaps people getting a bit heated and people calling you names and laughing at you. You know, that's not really too much of a cost to salvage our free society. That's really not too much to ask at all. So, as my New Year message, that's what I'm going to encourage you all to do. I know that if you live in the Leicester area, there is somebody who's doing this stall in the street stuff a lot more successfully than I am. So I can probably get some details of you, but if you go to Leicester City Centre on a regular basis, you'll see them, you know. And so I would encourage you to do that, because if we, you know, this is a hill that we have to die on. This hill has to be taken. You know, much has been lost already, but we have to, this has to be where we draw the line. We should have drawn the line ages back, but we are where we are. So this is what we have to do, because we've got work to do. Okay, people, stay free.